Howdy guys, welcome to another episode of my Encounter Workshop series. Today I have 12 amazing encounters that you can utilize in a swamp environment for party levels 1 through 3. These encounters come in 2 different difficulty levels, regular and elite, and they already come pre-balanced using my balancing methodology, which you can check out here if you're interested in that. And feel free to check out the timestamps in the description down below to easily navigate to whatever encounter you're looking for. But let's not waste any more time and jump into our first regular encounter for level 1. For our first encounter, we have one thorny veggie pygmy. Now, what makes this encounter so impactful and so interesting for a level 1 encounter is the fact that it has regeneration. Regeneration at level 1 is very powerful because if the party isn't able to figure out what damages that they need to do to actually stop the regeneration of this creature, then they're in for a world of pain, as this creature would just be able to fight them endlessly. On top of that, this creature also has a thorny body, meaning anytime the party tries to get too close or grab it, it can do additional piercing damage to them. I would highly recommend though that you utilize this creature kind of like Pseudo-Wuko in the original Pokemon games. Use its plant camouflage ability to make it look like a normal plant or just an extra thorny bush that as the party approaches it or gets too close, it surprises them, attacking them immediately. For our next encounter, we have one that's just as deadly as it is gross. 2 swarms of rot grubs. These guys can be extremely dangerous and can easily lead to a TPK. If they take down to 0 HP from this poison damage, it's straight death, no death saves. But there's still hope for your party. All they have to do is take a little bit of fire damage to get another chance to expel them out. But how are you going to catch the party with these creatures when they only have a movement speed of 5? I have 2 different ways that you can do this. The first one is have the grubs kind of infesting a lot of the natural fauna of the swamp, so as the party navigates through, it just crawls on them as they push through some of the bushes. Or you can have them eating at a body that's covered in loot, tempting the party to go in and investigate, trying to take it off the corpse. And as they do so, the grubs latch onto them, trying to burrow the way inside of them. Or as a bonus third option, you can do something really gross, kind of like the boomers from Left 4 Dead. Have a bloated corpse in the swamp, and as the party gets too close and pokes it or interacts with it, it explodes and violently covers them all in a swarm of these rot grubs as they crawl about their body trying to pierce inside. This is a great encounter to utilize if you want to foreshadow what the next battle might be, especially if it's going to be this next elite encounter. For our first elite encounter, we're going to keep the gross levels just as high as we did with the rock grubs by using one carrion ogre. These guys are very similar to those giant worm creatures that you can find in Dark Souls 3 in the area Cathedral of the Deep that just kind of wander the swamp, infecting you with a bunch of parasites. But the difference is these have the body of a bloated ogre that has the whole top part of the torso completely emptied out and replaced by a giant carrier crawler, this large parasitic worm thing that's just reaching out, hitting you with its tentacles and trying to bite you. This is such a gross encounter, but is so great to use if you foreshadowed it by using the rock grubs earlier, as it can make logical sense to have this creature wandering the swamp, consuming bodies partially and infecting them and filling them up with these rot grubs, trying to infect them to create more carrion ogres. So I would highly recommend you utilize them as some type of roaming beast in the swamp that the party is tasked with trying to clear out, as they're continuously infesting tons of the livestock and other food supplies for the nearby villages. For our first regular encounter at level 2, we have 4 Star Spawn Gru. Now, this is the perfect encounter if you plan to utilize or introduce a lot of aberrations in your campaign, or if you want to introduce extraterrestrial creatures to your world. These can be similar to the type of creatures you find in Elden Ring, or like the thing from Beyond the Stars in Darkest Dungeon. I think the best way to set up this encounter is to have the party investigate some type of crash site from a falling star or some type of meteorite that happened in the swamp. And as the party approaches the crash site, they notice these 4 weird creatures meandering about, speaking in a language that they don't understand. I think what makes these creatures really interesting is the fact that they have a kind of budget version of pack tactics, because when they use their bite attack, they cause the players to roll a saving throw to see if the Star Spawn Group has advantage on its next attack on that player. But this is buffed up a little bit by the fact that the Star Spawn Group have the Aura of Shriek ability, which makes the players roll at a disadvantage for their saving throws. So in terms of tactics during the encounter, you don't need to have them right next to each other like you would wolves, but I would still recommend keeping them firmly close so the shrieks can overlap and cover as many players as possible. Moving on to our next encounter, we have 4 regular veggie pygmies. Now, I know these 4 veggie boys are a lot weaker than their thorny cousin, but these guys are still very impactful. They still have their regeneration ability, and they still have their plant camouflage. And by using 4 of these little veggie boys, you can perfectly set up a situation where the party stumbles upon either a cave system or some type of ruins that these veggie pygmies are protecting. I would recommend they use bush tactics like in Fortnite with these veggie pygmies, using their sling to peg the party with rocks from a distance until they get too close, and then they finally unleash their claws on them. For our first elite encounter at level 2, we have a little bit of a horror theme going on. 2 boneless. These guys are fairly interesting in how you can utilize them, but here are 2 suggestions to really crank that horror theme up to another level. The first suggestion is to have the boneless wrapped around either a skeleton or some type of zombie that's attacking the party, but give the skeleton or zombie just 1 HP. That way, when the party finally strikes it down and it collapses and they think they won, they get surprised as the skin sloshes off the creature, animating itself and then slamming against them. Or this next idea is kinda twisted. You can have the boneless perched up on spikes in front of some type of ruins or castle in the swamp, and as the party gets close to them, they slither off the spike and start slamming onto the party, engulfing them in their skin and trying to choke them out. I can guarantee your players would definitely not see that coming. For our next elite encounter, we're going to keep the horror themes running by using 1 drowned assassin. Now these guys are kind of like a ranged version of Jason from the Friday the 13th movies. They wear a mask and they walk along the bottom of the swamp, peeking out and blasting your party with their crossbow. And should the party get too close, they take off their mask, revealing their true visage and terrifying them. Now in terms of tactics, we're obviously going to use this assassin to ambush the party, but you can go about this in a few different ways. If the party is walking along the land, you can have them peek out of the water, blast them with the crossbow, and walk back into the swamp. Or if the party is swimming through the swamp itself or rowing a boat through the swamp, have this drowned assassin pop out of the water like Jason, try to grab one of the players and drag them underneath. I think the part that makes this encounter super interesting is that the drowned assassin has the undead fortitude ability, meaning it's going to be a lot harder to kill it and make sure it dies. But even if the party does manage to defeat this drowned assassin, any other drowned assassin within a mile of this one instantly know that this one has been killed, and they can easily communicate with one another, so you can have more of these approach the party. However, I will caution against throwing a second drowned assassin at the party during the same adventuring day, as one of them should drain a fair amount of the party's resources. But if it doesn't, go ahead and throw a second one. Or a third. It's your table. Kill him. And now that our party's level 3, I think it's time we give them some magic items, or at least an opportunity to find some good loot. And we're going to do this by having them fight 1 vampiric mist. Now, if you know the lore behind vampiric mist, they form when a vampire is no longer able to return to its resting place for one reason or another. So, during this encounter, if one of your players manages to roll high enough on some type of knowledge check, they can find out that there is a resting place hidden somewhere with the vampire's original body and all of the loot that they've gathered. Now, in terms of how this encounter should play out, it should be fairly straightforward. Obviously, you want to have it happen at night and have the swamp be covered in fog. That way they don't see this red mist approach them as it starts to get close, completely engulf a player, and start life draining them. But we're not done giving our players magic items just yet. This next encounter gives our players the opportunity to either get a magic shield or a magic cloak that should help defend them against magic attacks. But if they're not interested in either of these 2 items, this appendage can be sold for a pretty penny, and what party doesn't love a large lump sum of gold? Now I bet you're wondering, what is this mystical creature that has this magic appendage that's sold for so much money or can be turned into crazy magic items? And honestly, it's fairly simple. 1. Flail snail. A flail snail's shell has innate anti-magic properties that help defend it against magical attacks. Plus, with its decently high AC, it should be quite the challenge for your party to manage to take it down. The flail snail itself doesn't do too much damage, just 1d4 plus 3, but the fact that it can do this 5 times each round really starts to add up. Plus, it has a large AoE stun that it can do 1 time each encounter, so I would save this for when it's being completely surrounded by your party. For our first elite encounter at level 3, we have the perfect minion monster. Not because they're weak, but because they're great guards to set up outside of a bigger swamp boss. This being 2 red caps. Or if you plan to introduce a lot more demons in your campaign, 2 mad caps. They're essentially the same creature, the only difference being slight lore changes, where one requires blood and the other requires demon ichor. One of my favorite things about this encounter is that they have a really funny ability called Ironbound Pursuit. This ability allows them to run up to their full speed against a player and then kick them with their iron boot, potentially knocking them prone. And then, once on the ground, they start whacking away at them with their sickle. And now for our last elite encounter, we have a very deadly Scooby-Doo villain, one Gallows Speaker. This guy is quite nasty in spite of its low AC, because all the damage it does is psychic damage, which means almost no character in no class at this level will have resistance to this type of damage, meaning it's going to pierce through everyone equally. I would suggest you give the party some type of quest that either sends them out into the swamp to figure out why a bunch of people are disappearing, or to investigate some type of haunted mansion or hut that's still in the swamp. As the party goes to investigate this location, have the Gallows Speaker rise out of the ground or phase through a wall, scaring the party and hitting one of them with its foretelling touch. While for its next attack the following round, it uses its Suffering Echoes on that same creature, because now that creature has a minus 1d4 to its saving throw, which means it has a higher chance of failing the Suffering Echoes. And the Suffering Echoes is quite the nasty ability. It's an AoE psychic damage ability that hits up to 4 targets, 1 main target, and bounces up to 3 additional ones. Now, this should be quite devastating for your party, as between each round, you should have the Gallows Speaker phasing through walls, moving to other rooms, or completely breaking line of sight with its incorporeal movement. So, if you found this video helpful and enjoyable, give this video a like and comment down below what kind of monsters you like to utilize in a swamp environment. And if you're looking for more encounters like these for levels 4 and 5, get subscribed so you don't miss out when I release that video. But yeah, see you guys next time.